Hey everyone, Adam here, So Was Your Podcast. Got another interview for you today. I got to sit down with Courtney Gains. If you don't know the name, you absolutely should, but you've definitely seen this guy in numerous movies. He's been acting a really long time. He's been in tremendous projects across the board. I mean, you could check out his IMDb, and you're just going to have revelation after revelation of, oh yeah, I remember him in that. Oh yeah, I remember him in that. Oh yeah, I remember him in that. It was so cool to be able to talk to an actor of his caliber who's been doing it for as long as he has, because there's so many places to go, so many cool stories, and he was the nicest guy, completely humble and nice to talk to and down to earth. And it was just really cool to talk to, like I said, somebody of his magnitude, but to have it be such a cool, casual conversation, like catching up with an old friend, when it's a guy who I've been watching in movies since I was, I don't know, 6 or 7 years old when I first saw Memphis Belle, for example. I could sit here and just title drop everything he's been in, but he'll do a better job talking about himself than I ever could, of course. It was a really cool conversation. You should dive right in and really refresh yourself on his resume, because he's been in stuff you forgot he's been in, but you loved him in it. Hey everyone, Adam here, So Was Your Podcast. I'm sitting down with Courtney Gains to talk about his amazing career and his newest movie. How you doing, Courtney?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you for coming on. This should be really cool.
My pleasure. I saw something flying around.
Okay, so you have a new movie out, Queen Bee. It's in theaters now.
Correct.
Before we get, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, before we get there, the one kind of boilerplate thing I like to do is ask people in the creative arts industry, whatever they happen to be doing, to go all the way back to the beginning and kind of talk about, what was the bug that got you and how'd you get your start?
Yeah. So the bug was when I was 10, I was in this after school program that where all the broken home kids and tough kids all were. People had to work, or both parents had to work jobs. So we'd be there to like 5 or 6 or whatever. And we had this teacher named Miss Gardner who was just a tough bird. And so we all respected her, like that's when you could actually still put your hands on the kids. So like we were fighting, like she'd grab you by your ear. You'd be like, oh, okay. But like we never thought that we were being abused. We thought she was just like taking care of business, right? So we respected her. She got us to do theater. That was the crazy thing. She got the toughest. We did a play in drag where she got the toughest kid in school to play the lead.
All right.
And that was brilliant, right? Because if he can do it, then we can do it. Because if anybody wants, you'd be like, oh, is that funny? We were dressed like women. Well, let me go tell Frankie you thought that was funny.
Right. Kind of give you free passage.
Absolutely. So the first thing we ever did was Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. I was a dwarf. The prince fell out. She decided, you're the prince. I'm like, I don't want to be the prince. I don't want to kiss the girl. She's like, shut up, you're the prince. And so going on the boards for the first time, there was something weird and familiar and safe and wonderful about it. And then when I, kiss her and she comes to life and the crowd applauds, I was hooked, man. I was hooked. So I'd bug my parents, to get me in a class. And my mother, sort of interesting enough, she was in the USO, went to a fame school, entertaining troops in World War II and all of that. And yet she was sort of like, I don't want you to be a childhood actor. So she kept me on. I kept bugging her. Finally, she put me in a class. I hated the class. I was going to quit it because it was like, you got to understand, I was from like tough neighborhoods, and this was like kids in tights and tap dancing. And I was like, this is not what I meant, man,
Yeah.
And so I was about to quit. And when we were leaving the class, this guy stopped us on the street. His name was Virgil Fry. And he was like, is your son an actor? I love his look. And we're like, yeah, okay, who are you? And he's like, oh, my son's auditioning for a commercial next door. And I was like, uh-huh. And then his son came out, and his son's named Sean Fry. And at that time, Sean worked a lot. He was in the original Fun with Dick and Jane. I'd seen him in several movies of the week. And I thought, well, this guy must know what he's doing. His kid's working. Long story short, I ended up being with that guy for a decade.
Wow.
Taught me the craft. He was a working actor himself. Taught me the craft. Was for a period of time my manager, and broke me into the business. So, I owe him a lot.
Yeah, that's a huge. If you were 2 minutes earlier or later, didn't run into him.
Yeah, well, that's I don't believe that every moment of our life has meaning. I think some of it's random, but I think there are pivotal things that are not mistakes. And I think that I was committed to creating that, and I think the universe, being that we have a universe around us, was committed to bringing that to me, and that mentor showed up. And I think mentors are can make a huge difference, whether it be sport or anything for that matter. But having people who've been there before you that can show you how to walk the road makes a huge difference.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've always kind of had that inkling too. And then I finally got around to reading, and I'm sure everyone you've talked to in show business has read that Joseph Campbell, Hero with a Thousand Faces.
Yes. Well, Star Wars, a lot of them.
Right.
Star Wars is based on that. Yeah.
It's all there. Sorry, it's 100 degrees in here. I'm dripping. But yeah, that mentor thing is like that kind of like the two fathers thing where you've always seemed to have someone filling in that void in your life.
And my parents were great about that. They recognized, so like my benchmark, and it still is a benchmark, but my benchmark starting out was like, good actors can cry, and the class that I was in, they weren't able to teach anything like that. And within the third class with this guy, he set up an improv where my character, or where I had gotten an acting job. And so I was playing that all excited and, new, not thinking ahead, like to what's the setup here. And the setup was that my parents come in and tell me I can't take the job. I flipped out. I picked up a chair and chucked it across the room at them. And before I knew it, I was crying, right? And I remember I was so excited after the scene. I got on, there was a pay phone in the back, and I got on and I called my parents. They're like, what's going on? I said, I cried, man. I cried. They're like, what? I'm like, they were like, they could see how enthusiastic I was. And they were like, well, whatever this guy's doing, he's loving it. And we're going to keep, and they had to scrape the shekels together to keep me in a class. My brother too. My brother was a truck driver, and they would come to him sometimes and say, "We don't have it this month," and he'd pony up the money. So, that support. But they could see that he was providing something that they couldn't, and they didn't put their ego in the way of that. They just wanted me to succeed.
That family support's amazing.
Yeah, and there are a lot of people who take on this profession who don't have that. I taught acting for about 20 years as well, and that's can be a really difficult thing for actors to not have their family or their friends support from where they're from. And I'm pretty rebellious. I just would have been like, I'll show you and shut your ass up. That's what, if some people don't think I can do something, because the neighborhood I grew up in, believe me, nobody thought I was going to amount to squat, and would tell me, oh, you're going to become, pardon my friendship, like a fag in tights. Like that's the kind of things they'd say to me in my tough gang neighborhoods I grew up in. I'd say, you'll see, because I told them from the time I was 10, I'm going to be an actor. And they'd be like, oh, yeah. And now they're all like, oh, you made it out of the neighborhood, Holmes. Good job, But they're like the lobster thing. You're trying to get out of the tank, and the other lobsters are trying to pull you back down, But I was always not going to let that stop. Matter of fact, I just used it as fuel. I'm going to show you. But some people, especially with their families, it's just really soul crushing for them that they don't have people to believe in them. And the families just don't understand how hard it is, all the work you have to put in a class or auditions or whatever to get a single job. They don't understand all that goes into it. And so then they're just, when you do get something, unless it's something huge, they're just like, oh, well, okay, so now what? They don't give them props,
Yeah. Well, I think for people, like me on the outside, like them, we only see the final product.
Correct.
We don't see the 10,000 people who tried to get that role.
Not only 10,000 people to get the role, but look at the credits at the end. It takes a village to make a movie,
Oh yeah, for sure.
A lot of hands go into that thing being done. The actor is the one who gets all the sort of the glory, if you will. He's in front of the camera. And yes, we have to go through the emotional discomfort that, crew members don't have to go through. That's our job. But if it isn't lit and it isn't shot or it isn't directed and there's somebody not doing sound and, somebody didn't do the production design and find a good location and, all those things, there is no movie, man. There's no movie.
Yeah, it is incredible when you start breaking it down like that. Especially like I've been talking to a lot of people, now that we're kind of just coming out of COVID.
Yeah.
So people who managed to put a movie together during that and doing the skeleton crew thing, and it's like you have no idea how hard, well, you do, but people have no idea how hard it is to get all those pieces moving.
In some way, lean and mean can be really good depending on the project. I was fortunate enough to actually do 3 movies during the pandemic, which is pretty crazy.
Oh yeah, that's huge.
It was pretty crazy how it all got worked out. But one of them, a movie called River, they had a pretty skeletal crew, but those guys had worked together a lot before, so they were a good, well-oiled team. But that movie, remarkably, for an independent film, going to come out July 13th. So less than a year from the time I shot it, it's coming out for an independent film. That's a really quick turnaround. So
yeah,
excited about that. it's a sci-fi movie. I say in quotes because it's not like in space or there's tons of CGI, but it's about this girl who's having time lapses, trying to figure out where she's going, and her friends are like, well, where are you going? And I play sort of a surrogate father who's also the town psychologist, and who starts doing therapy sessions where they're trying to figure out what's happening and stuff. And I had a nice COVID beard to go with that one. And, very different role, very warm, very earthy character, Dr. Michael Glenn. So I'm looking forward to that coming out in July.
Nice. Did you find doing something that is kind of that warm, comforting character kind of helped with all the insanity going on when you're not on set?
It was just nice to do something different, so a lot of times I am the character that is the crazy guy on the set, or the crazy character pushing the boundaries and that like that. So it was just nice. I think I'm starting to get, as I'm getting older, you have to sort of adjust to the age you are now and what kind of roles there are. And I think as I start to age into where I'm at now, you're going to get more mature roles. You're going to play sheriffs. You're going to play doctors. You're going to play psychologists. You're going to play people that are established in their professions. And so any chance I get to do that and start to get my feet wet, and then also eventually have footage to show, because the industry basically sees whatever you show. It's like a horse with blinders. The more evidence you have, I can do this, I can do that, the more open they are to giving you that type of job the next time.
That is the crazy thing about your profession is like for me, I do web development as my day job.
Hmm.
When I first got out of college, I couldn't get a job doing web development because I never had a job doing web development. But after I do a couple, it builds. But for you, it's kind of like almost like you're back to the drawing board. I mean, not exactly, but
no, there's some truth to that. But I think most businesses, and certainly the movie business, is definitely catch 22s. Where there's like initially to get in the union, you can't get a union job unless you've been in the union, right? You can't get in the union unless you've done a union job, right? That's the
right.
first thing you're presented with. Now, I was fortunate because I was young when I started, and so they need new faces, and commercials particularly they like new faces. So my entry in was getting I did a Safeguard soap commercial in New York. That was my first job, and but it got me my union card. That was the most important thing. So that was the first hurdle to get over, right? And yeah, you always get to a certain level. You want to get to the next level, you got to figure out how to get past that next, like in the Chinese, like you go to Chinatown, you have the two lions. It's confusion and what is the other one? Confusion and I forget right now. But the bottom line is you have to get to enlightenment. You have to get through these doors of confusion and such. And that's in any business, and certainly in this one. And yeah, if you've been around as long as I have, you have to continue to reinvent yourself. And I think the key to that is being able to realistically look at yourself in the mirror and see what you look like now, be objective, and then go, what is the market for where I look now? And then see if you can actually fulfill, those types of roles. And, I've had to do that in my career. I had a, great teen 80s run. And when that was over, there was no 20 something roles, but I looked 20 something. There was just 30 something roles. So I couldn't go back. So I just grew my hair out long, combed it back, grew a goatee and said, I'm going to play Mad Dogs. I can play Mad Dogs. That's what I can do that as an adult. And that's, my 90s run was primarily guest stars in television, where I played a lot of bad guys. and I had a good run there, and then pivoted off of that and back into, cut the hair and clean my act up, and then did Sweet Home Alabama, and kind of opened up a whole reminder that I could do comedy. And that was another phase. And now I'm in this, 50s phase,
Yeah. It's really interesting that you've been in the business for so long, yet you're constantly new in the business. It's really interesting.
Well, you really, what have you done for me lately is definitely the name of the game in the business. If you haven't, if you've had a drought, like I've had a little bit of a drought for guest stars. The last great guest star I did was Criminal Minds, and then it was just sort of like 50-year-old white guys' work just kind of dried up quite a bit. And it took me a while to get another guest star. I was doing films, but that sort of dried up. And I just recently did a guest star on a show. It's a guest star, I guess, technically. It's a show called Tales for BET. The reason I say technically is because it's a 10 episode anthology. So each episode is a completely different story. So it's still, I guess, technically a guest star, but there's no series regulars, as it were, right? So
yeah.
I play a good corrupt cop in that one. So,
Oh, nice.
but now that I've got that, it'll be so much easier to get my next guest star because that's how it is. It's like the perception is like, well, what's he been doing lately? Oh, he has something. Oh, then we're more apt. It's down to him and somebody else. Down to say maybe three people. They'll be more apt to go with the one that has the freshest credits.
Hmm.
That's the way it goes.
Is it that kind of thing where it's like you make sure you book your next job while your current job's still going
If
on?
you're lucky enough to do that,
Yeah.
that's great. Often, though, people ask me what's next, and I don't know. And at least at this right now, I have a list of movies coming out, which is great that we could talk about. But a lot of times, it's just one job at a time. I've managed to cobble that into 100+ credits.
Yeah, this might be a little bit of a tangent, and it's definitely going to be, every person would have a different answer. But you mentioned you have a role on a BET show playing a corrupt cop, so we kind of have an idea of what that's about. Do you find doing a role like that? I mean, obviously you're an actor, and most normal people know that's not who you are. But do you feel like if you do a role that specific and that real, you might have a hard time escaping it for a little bit?
Well, public perception, yeah, sometimes people take it very seriously. Like, I mean, I experienced that out of the gate with Children of the Corn. I mean, there would be kids who would see me and go like a running to their mother, or something, literally. And you'd just be like, wow. Or people come to you and go like, I have nightmares about you. You know what I mean? Like, really, like,
You're like,
stuff
hey, thanks.
I was not ready for. Now I
Right.
get more tongue in cheek about it when people are like, I do conventions. They're like, thanks for ruining my childhood or scaring the crap out of me as a kid. I'm like, you're welcome.
Yeah.
You know? You're obviously here at a convention, so you love horror now. So it's
Yeah, it means you did your job. You left an
sure.
impact.
But it's just funny when it does bleed over. Like a really weird example of it bleeding over is the role I did in Colors. Every Los Angeles LAPD has seen that movie, and so sometimes when I get seen on the street, they'll be like, "Come here," and they're like not sure if they know me from a movie or if they know me as somebody that they should know, like they profiled or whatever. And then once I tell them Colors, and they're like, "Oh man, yeah," they remember one cop told me a story in LA that there was a guy in uh, Sweden who saw the movie and was so blown away by the idea, loved the idea so much of what it would be like to be LAPD that he moved to LA and became an LAPD cop. And they say he's a great cop.
Wow.
And I'm like, I don't know. That movie doesn't look very glamorous to me for being an LAPD, but to him, that seemed like a great thing. And apparently he enjoys it. So you'd never imagine the impact that, some movie ring can have even to somebody halfway across the world.
Yeah, that's a pretty cool story.
Yeah. Wild, right?
Yeah, really. All right, and you mentioned that you have a list of movies, and I looked at your IMDb before we started doing this, and you have like what 100 things coming out soon. So
Well, all of a sudden, there was sort of like a backlog of work I've done the last few years, and I maybe just now because COVID's broke or whatever. And most of them have been picked up by Gravitas Ventures, which is like, thank you very much. So the first one is Queen Bees, which is out now. I did that in Atlanta like 2-3 years ago, and I just do a cameo in that, but I was very excited. I made the trailer, which I wasn't expecting, so that's really killer. But the real great thing about being in that project is I got to work with Ellen Bernstein, Anna Margaret, Jane Curtin, and Loretta Devine. Man, like that was like some iconic actresses to get a chance to play in the sandbox with. So I had a great time.
that's awesome. You find it kind of weird. You were talking about this movie now, and you made it like 4 years ago.
I'm used to it. I mean, I've had a lot of independent films that take years to come out. I've been involved as a producer on films that take years to come out. So I know it can happen, but there was just sort of a backlog of several films that I thought we're not just going to necessarily go straight to VOD either, which I've been involved in plenty of those too. I thought these had the potential to get theatrical releases. So you're always more excited about that when you can get a theatrical release. That doesn't happen every time, that sort of takes the status up on everything. But so Queen Bees just came out and that's doing well. And the next one is that movie I told you, River, that Gravitas also picked up. That's coming out July 13th. And I just found out yesterday, the first film I did in Atlanta was a film called Charming the Hearts of Men, which is a pretty cool project set in the 50s. It deals with a woman who sort of comes to terms with the racism within her small town and helps get legislation made for equal rights, but also includes the word women's equal rights. sort of loosely based on a true story. And I just heard nothing about this thing for a while. And that just got, I found out that just got picked up, and that's coming out in August 13th. So, and
Wow.
that's also so I have 3 movies coming out in a row, all by the same company, all in a month period, all getting theatricals and VOD blasts. So I'm really happy about that. And it's going to be
Yeah.
good footage for me. It's nice current footage. Like, again, you need to put on your actors access your current clips of what you look like now. That's what they want, and show them what you can do now. So it's going to be a nice, and they're all different characters, and so it's going to be good stuff. It's going to be stuff that's going to help me get work in the future. So.
That's awesome. And it's amazing to have 3 movies coming out in the span of a month.
Oh yeah. Oh, and wait, another one came out that none of us knew that were involved in the project. It's just on Amazon Prime, but it had gone to Europe and such, as a horror movie called Await the Dawn. Dee Wallace is in it, Vernon Wells, myself. That just went on Prime this week, and nobody knew. Nobody knew. That was a big surprise. So even another one that I did a few years ago is all of a sudden out, and so it's just all of a sudden it's like this floodgates have opened, and it's like boom, 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 boom. They're all coming released at the same time. So.
Yeah. Wow.
It's famine. That's often this business, though. Sometimes you can't buy a job, and other times you're having to turn down jobs because you just booked 2 jobs. So it's a famine business, man.
Yeah, I can imagine. You mentioned that it's always more exciting, or maybe better in some ways, that you get a theatrical release. Are you kind of having a hard time with this? There seems to be a lot more of a blurry line between theatrical and at home now. Like, it's almost non-existent.
Yeah, no, especially after COVID. I don't think that box office is maybe ever going to be the same, as far as box office in theaters. And a lot of, there's been theaters having to close, and there's been, conglomerates buying up theaters. And I think it's definitely kind of becoming a dinosaur. I love going to a theater to see a movie, on the big screen like that. But nowadays, with monster TVs people have and surround sound, and you can see it, and, it's easy to just click a button and see it at your house. That I think that, just like the record industry was changed by the digital medium, I think right now the film industry is going through that same big change. I think as the CD died, and then now the DV died, I think now the theaters are kind of the last stronghold. I think it's just, digital is non-physical is the future.
Yeah, I feel like it's inevitable. It just seems to be given a push forward with the whole COVID thing, when we didn't have a choice.
It sure did. It sure did. You got to roll with it. But still, even if the movies don't do great in the theaters, just to know they're actually out on a theater, and there's a poster and a kiosk in a theater, and they're showing the trailers of it. I mean, that's still a bit of a thrill for me.
Oh, for sure. I hope that never actually goes away, because there is something to that experience of going in and.
They just need to charge a little less, and come down on the popcorn prices. That's nice.
Yeah, that's a good point. It shouldn't be $70 for a couple to go out to a movie.
That might be the biggest markup of any food in history is popcorn.
5,000%.
I remember when I was a kid, we used to have this little theater that would show, second run movies, and obviously this is quite a ways back in the 70s, but literally $1.50, I could get in the movie and get some flicks and a soda, and I was like set up, for parents would give me a couple bucks, and I was like good to go for the day,
Yeah, right.
Some hot tamales or something, and I was good to go. Those days are gone, man.
Oh yeah, I definitely feel you there.
Got to give a kid a 20 just to get him in the
I think that buys a ticket now.
Yeah, exactly.
I generally try not to do this kind of stuff when I talk to people, because you might be sick to death of talking about this. But you were in some super iconic movies like the 80s, like Back to the Future is one of my all-time favorite franchises. You already mentioned Children of the Corn. What was it like in that era where those kind of teen movies were everything?
Well, when it's like anything else, when you're in it, you don't really know, right? Like that there was gonna be a thing called teen 80s cinema, and like this conversation now, like they don't make them like that anymore, and all that, right? You don't know. You're just in it. All I knew is I was a young actor, and what I was, I'd been in this professional workshop for 5 years, and everyone was saying when you turn 18, you're going to blow up, because everybody knew I was good. but the emancipation laws were different then, where you had to be 18 to play younger because you couldn't work a full day. Now you can get emancipated and work full days. So it was all about. So I was all about. I had training. I looked 15 when I was 18, and teen cinema was blowing up. So it was really more of a question of being at the right place at the right time and taking advantage of that. I had good training that gave me a decided advantage over a lot of other young actors in Hollywood, in my opinion. And I think that's also the advantage that's allowed me to continue on. So I never, some of the people in my acting class, within a few years of this class, people would get work. Well, what happens when they started getting work? They stopped going to class anymore. They thought they were like, I'm good. Obviously I'm good. I'm getting jobs. They weren't thinking about the transition into adulthood. I was very clear that there was people who had success as teenagers and did not make that transition into adulthood. And I did not want to be that person. So I knew that I had to keep working at it and keep getting, because I knew that now you're talking about people who say maybe studied at Yale or Dartmouth for 4 or 5 years, coming from England with great training from like RADA, and now you're in the competition with them. They haven't been working, they don't have your resume yet, but they have a lot of good training and as you get older, you're just going to continue to go up against. I mean, if someone's in the business now at 50 with me, that means they've stuck it out long enough and built a resume long enough that they've hung in. So, we're all good at this point. You wouldn't have lasted 20, 30 years if you stunk, so you have to keep up in your game. You got to keep working at your craft.
That foresight you had, even as an 18-year-old, was that like your mom was involved in show business? Did she kind of help you, or did you just kind of figure it out early?
Um, my mom was in the USO at a young age, like I said, which was interesting. And she did some chorus lines in movies, but she was no longer in the biz, so she had nothing really to offer. My dad was a laborer at Warner Brothers, so he was just a working dude, So like they were not really like industry savvy. It was just that I'd always gotten along with adults better than sometimes I got along with my own peers. And so I would, like with my acting mentor, we became very close, and I spent a lot of time with him. He was a professional working actor, and I would listen to what the veterans had to say. I'm sort of, sometimes stunned by when young people talk to me. They're telling me how things are, and I often say to them, like, maybe you should shut up and listen to somebody who's been doing it 35 years. And I say that not just because they're acting the way they're acting, but because I was smart enough to listen at their age. Look, this person has been doing it. They know, not you.
Right.
So shut up and listen. So I had that ability to learn from their successes, but also learn from your elders' mistakes, because they make my mentor made plenty of mistakes. And he's not a perfect man, So I learned a lot from the things that he did that didn't work either, and would file those things away. And I just had that ability to look at where do I, they talk about in any business, like be able to look 100 years out or whatever. I didn't do the 100 years, but I was always able to look out 10 years out, and even to the point where I'm at now, like, where do I want to be in my acting career at 50, in my 50s? Like, looking at my mentor when he was in his 50s, and there was things he would hold, he'd do some film and he'd hold all these hopes that it was going to break his career, break him in another level. And I could even it down. I was like, this film's not going to be big enough to do that. I could tell already. I mean, that this. So I try to have a much more realistic understanding of what's being created and where I'm at. The pulse of where you're at. Know when it's something really big is happening and when something isn't, or even an opportunity like this, Queen Bees. Even though it's a small role, it's this amazing cast, right? And it's this going to be a pretty big theatrical release film. So it was definitely an opportunity for me to get out here and do interviews. Even though I didn't have a big role, I have a big enough name, and it's with this bigger, great cast that I have something to talk about. And so take advantage of the moment. Be smart.
Yeah, that's really, really solid advice. I mean, really for anyone coming up in any field, but especially such a competitive field that you're in.
Yeah, you got to know when to seize the day, right? Like, when Sweet Home Alabama was coming out, that was the first big theatrical I'd had in a long time. I hadn't been on red carpets or anything for a while, and even though I'd been working, but I knew that there was going to be a big red carpet for that. So I found a PR person that I liked, and I did red carpets for for like 6 months. I'm not gonna lie, it's not my favorite thing to go do. It's very awkward, and then everybody's yelling at you to look at them because they want you to look dead at their photography. You're like, stupid and awkward. But I was like, I have a big red carpet coming up. I want to be prepared. And it turned out that the premiere ended up being in New York instead of LA. So my publicist couldn't be there. But I had been through it enough that I knew exactly how to go up and talk to the publicist who was running it. And then I did my red carpet, and then a bunch of the cast that were friends that I'd become friends with who had never done a red carpet, I ended up handling them with the publicist again. I ended up basically acting as a sub publicist for helping my friends out. Like, here's what you got to do. We're going to talk about it. Get your name in. And I was like, had I not prepared, I not only would have not have been able to help myself and been prepared, but I was able to help a bunch of other people. Some of them was their first red carpet. Some of them were locals hired in the Southeast and things like that. So, being prepared, whether it be as an actor or for a moment like that, is always the best route.
Sorry.
I was say, just don't wing it, right?
Right. Yeah. It sounds like you always were able to take a step back and look at yourself objectively and figure out the next move and how to do things exactly right.
I think I don't want to say exactly right.
Not exactly. Okay. But
believe me,
at least make an attempt.
I've made plenty of mistakes in my career too. When, who knows if they were for the best or for the worst, but a good example of, making a mistake was after Memphis Belle, being that was literally the most coveted movie to get that year for an actor my age. I thought I'd arrived, you know what I mean? Like, I thought I had arrived. My head was like, whoop, and I had other things I had wanted to do. I started a production company. I started a band, and I was putting energy to those things. And what I got out of Memphis Belle was a lot of really good opportunities, like a lot of great auditions. And I wasn't preparing. I was showing up and I was doing the schmooze more than I was doing the work, which was what got me to that place. And if you look at my IMDb, you'll see there's like a 2-year gap. And it was sort of a combination of not paying attention, having a band, having a production company. I got married, had a kid, like all these things that sort of took precedent. And it wasn't until I had a kid that I sort of woke back up and said, "Oh shit, I gotta provide now. I'm a father," That I was like to my band, if we ain't serious, I'm out. If my production company, I just started dropping. Because I said the one thing I can rely on is me getting acting jobs. I know if I put my best foot forward, I can get back, and that's what I did. And I it was like starting over after 2 years. Really, I had to get new agents and I found my footing in doing guest stars, because it was sort of like this studio thing, movies at that point, and indie movies that was like sort of the Sundance thing, which I wasn't really a part of. So I sort of found my niche in doing television. But that's why I kept food on the table, and that's what the whole thing shifted. It wasn't about, artistic satisfaction or something over here. It was about, I get out of my way, y'all. I'm coming in this audition to get some work, to get some food, to keep a roof over our head. I'm dead serious now. Watch out. And especially when it came to bad guys, dudes would tell me they'll come out of an audition feeling good, and then the elevator door opens and it's me, and I already got my game face on. They're like, crap, Courtney's here. That dude's gonna get the job. And a lot of times they were right,
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's some of that reputation from the screen falling to the real world that works to your benefit.
Yeah, but you also find you'd be amazed in auditions how lax some people are. Like they you go in and you sign. Now it's all on video, which is great. I don't like going into offices, but when you sign in, you have to wait in this room, and it's sort of the pace in which this group is getting auditions done. Some people start talking to each other because they're friends or whatever, and then all of a sudden their name's called, and they go in there and they're not prepared. The scary guys are the ones that you see are just staying in it. I always just sign in and go down the hall. I don't want to talk to nobody, especially if I'm playing like a tough guy or whatever. I got to get that toot right, and I'm just preparing. I'm trying to keep myself in the zone so when I walk in there, I can rock and roll, because if I don't, then my nerves will get the better of me too. The work has to be bigger than your considerations. It's not, you're coming in an audition. Everybody else in that room's got a job. You're the one dude coming in trying to show, pick me out of these other 20 dudes, today. It's not like a power position. You know what I mean? Matter of fact, they call going up for an audition when your agent or your manager, they call it a submission. Think about that for a minute. You're submitted to somebody, and then they decide if they want you to come in, and then they decide if they want to give you a job. You're not in the best position. So I got to come, to take power of that room. I got to come in and be focused and really go after my objective that I want to accomplish. you know?
Yeah, for sure. You're loaded with good advice.
That's me, the old veteran guy. Let me tell you something, kid. I
uh,
started when it was film. You know?
yeah, there you go. There's another change.
It's funny though. I do tell these guys a stories like on the Tales. There was an actress that played the other cop, young in her 20s, and I found myself saying things like, "Yeah, I started when it was film." And she's like, "Oh, really? What was that like?" You're just like, "Man, I'm getting old."
I mean, even I feel like film wasn't that long ago, and I wasn't working in it.
Yeah, but it's a rarity now. It's a rarity
Yeah.
to see somebody shooting film. I loved it. I mean, the technology is good, but it's not the same. If the warmness of the color, this is the difference between, like, a record and a CD, right? A record's got a certain warmness to it. When they used to do music on tape versus digital, it's just a different warmness, that you can't get doing this digital stuff.
Yeah, it's almost too clean and clinical.
Also, there was more of a seriousness about, because film was expensive.
Hmm.
The set would be focused, right? It'd be quiet, and like, you can't waste film, and when you mess a cut, you gotta do it again. Like, it was takes nowadays, they'll just keep rolling, like, we're rolling. It's like, it's just, it's there's no, and people will be talking. There's not quite the focus that there used to be, because you're not burning film meant something,
There's literal dollars going up.
by the second. Yeah, not that
Yeah.
you're not spending some money on the digital side, but it's nowhere near. And so people just keep rolling, including the Nagra. But Nagra used to be taped too. The sound guy would have a conniption if you just kept rolling. You know what I mean? It's costing him money. He's paying for those damn reels.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, Courtney, I really appreciate you coming on. That was an amazing conversation. It sounds like you're doing great with all these movies coming out. So I, wish you the best of luck in the future.
If I can plug one more thing,
Oh, absolutely.
and that's music. Got a couple things going on musically. I have a record I'm putting out called Acoustic Gains. That's an acoustic tracks, and I just put out my second single last week, Cherished, and the third single's coming out next Monday called Let It Ride. So I got that going on musically, and I also have a band called Ripple Street, and we just put out a couple weeks ago put out a single called Would You. That's totally the opposite of this, very heavy, kind of Black Sabbath-esque. And you can check us out on Spotify, both under Ripple Street and or Courtney Gains. And then you can find us on iTunes and Deezer and all those, Shazam and all those. So I just wanted to plug the music side of what's going on as you see the guitars behind me.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to plug your socials if you do that?
Yeah, sure. Just you can find me on Facebook and you can find me on Instagram under my name. You'll be able to figure it out. But that's it. I don't do Twitter. That's my band does Twitter. You can find Twitter on my band Ripple Street on Twitter, but I don't handle the Twitter stuff.
All right, cool. Well, once again, thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Great. Good talking to you. Have a good day, huh?
You too.
All right.
I'd like to thank Courtney Gains one more time for taking time out of his obviously busy schedule to talk to us about his new upcoming projects that just came out, and his career as a whole. I can't reiterate enough how awesome it was to talk to somebody like Courtney and to have him turn out to be so cool and easy to talk to. Make sure you listen to So Wizard Podcast every single week wherever you get your podcasts. So Wizard Podcast can be found on Patreon, where for as little as $1 a month you get multiple monthly bonus shows. I forgot to do it up front, but make sure you like and subscribe. We have a ton new content coming your way. You're not going to want to miss out. SoWizardPodcast.com is your source for reviews, recommendations, merchandise, and more. We love hearing feedback, so drop some note in the comments, leave us something on social media. All the accounts can be found after the show and in the show notes. And on a more personal note, a good friend and I have an ongoing comic series out. It's called Social Studies. It's a slice-of-life comedy comic about the high school experience, all the ridiculousness that goes along with it. You can find that at socialstudiescomic.com. We really appreciate if you check it out. More issues coming soon. Chapter 1 just wrapped up. Good time to jump on board. Thanks.